I'm ready to get going here. So thanks for joining on the Zoom or Facebook Live or watching later. Really appreciate that I'm able to record these and then have them for later because I know it's always challenging to find a good time for everybody to meet. So today we are, sorry about that, I'm just in my office. So today we are here to talk about our Stream and Riparian Cost Share program. This is our official launch. You do not have to be here in order to be eligible to participate in the program, but we just wanted to make sure we had an official overview of the program and what we're talking about to help us reach people and get interest and get moving into trying to do more to protect our streams here in Curry's Fork. Okay, and may the 4th be with you for your Star Wars fans out there. Just had to throw that in since I'm doing a presentation on this day. And once again, thanks for joining. If you're not aware, our Curry's Fork Watershed program, it's supported by Oldham County Fiscal Court, but my position and the work of this program, including the cost share, is funded by a grant through the EPA that gets distributed to the Division of Water, and then we apply for grants, and when we receive those grants, that's where that funding comes from. And reminders for Zoom, just this meeting is being recorded, and mute yourself unless you're speaking, but feel free to use that chat if that's helpful. Okay, I'm going to skip over this because I think that's not accurate there. Okay, so for those that don't know me, my name is Becca, and I'm the Watershed Coordinator for the Curry's Fork program. I work out of Oldham County Fiscal Court Engineer's Office. The easiest way to stay up to date on what's going on is social media. We have our Curry's Fork Watershed Facebook page, our Friends of Curry's Fork group, and then all of these recordings and any videos and how-tos that I put together end up on our YouTube page. That's a nice location there to check things out. I also send out emails. We have an article on what's happening, and we have stakeholder meetings a few times a year. And then just a quick overview of our program. So we have public meetups. We have both our Friends of Curry's Fork group, which is a general meetup group, and then our more specific pollinator garden group. So I reach out to people interested in doing site visits, getting into pollinator gardens, helping with volunteer events. And we always try to have volunteer events throughout the year. So we have tree plantings. We just planted a new pollinator garden at the LaGrange Library yesterday. Really excited to see that grow. We have tabling events, litter pickup, and then general, ask people to just generally help to spread awareness about what we're doing and get involved. And then we have different educational workshops. I'm available if you would like a site visit at your property to talk about what's going on, lots of resources and materials, and then really spreading out what we do in terms of trying to help our streams between septic systems, rain barrels, streams, which is of course why you're here today, rain gardens, and then other things there. So I'm going to jump into a very quick intro to our Curry's Fork Watershed program, just to bring a little bit of background and justification for why we do what we do. So a watershed, I always got to start with the concept of a watershed is just simply the area of land that when it rains, all that water channels to those same points on the landscape, so to our streams and then outflows to more streams. And this is based on the scale that we're looking at. So all the water in Curry's Fork ends up going into Floyd's Fork, that ends up in the Ohio River, and that ends up in our Mississippi River and out to the Gulf Coast. So we're all connected here. And then you can see with this map here, if this is new to you, the Curry's Fork Watershed is completely within Oldham County. And we have 4 sub-watersheds we talk about, which are just smaller watersheds within the Curry's Fork. So if you hear the names North Fork, Curry's Fork, South Fork, Curry's Fork, or Asher's Run, just know we're still talking about the Curry's Fork Watershed, just on a little bit more specific scale. Okay, so justification for why we have this program. So these are the streams in Oldham County that are monitored by the Kentucky Division of Water, and they are symbolized based on if the streams are meeting the Division of Water water quality standards. So you can see circled here in red, these are our Curry's Fork streams, and they are not meeting water quality standards both for human health based on bacteria and for aquatic wildlife based on the amount of oxygen that are in these streams. So this is really the background justification for why we are trying to work to change this, because we would love it if our streams met water quality standards. And you can see below this, Floyd's Fork is also in red, so they've got some issues there too. We're not focused on that just based on being strictly focused on the Curry's Fork watershed. There's lots of streams out there that are having issues, and while we focus on the Curry's Fork watershed, I'm sure if you're traveling elsewhere or outside of this watershed, you can find streams that could need some help where you are as well. And then you can see that Harrods Creek here in both green and yellow. Yellow means that those streams are partially meeting standards, and green means that they're meeting standards. So this is just a way to show what's going on in our streams in kind of one simple map here. And here's some pictures that might seem familiar to you. So what do streams look like that are not meeting water quality standards? So we have lots of flooding. Our streams are often brown because of all the erosion, and most of that erosion is coming directly off of our stream banks. We've got issues with utility lines being exposed because those streams have eroded, properties flooding, litter, different drainage way issues, algae. So this is a pretty good representation of some of the problems that we're finding here in Curry's Fork. And then I mentioned a little bit looking outside of Curry's Fork. So this is a map of all the streams in Kentucky that are monitored by the Kentucky Division of Water. Again, color-coded based on if they're meeting standards or not. So this is as of 2016. 79% of the streams in Kentucky that have been monitored are not meeting water quality standards. So just getting a sense of what's going on in the state as a whole. And then this next map here is a map of watersheds that have active watershed planning efforts. So we can see up here, we have Curry's Fork. Darby Creek is also in Oldham County. They have an approved watershed plan. I don't think they're super active at the moment, but these are areas where there is an approved watershed plan and there is some active efforts going on right now. So considering that just about every county in Kentucky has water quality impairments, there's actually not that many areas that have water quality planning efforts. So we're kind of special here in Oldham that we do have a group that's actively trying to work with the community to improve our streams. And then I just wanted to give a quick overview of stream function and habitat. I'm not going to get too extensive into all of this, but we are focused directly on our streams. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why our streams are important to begin with. And this part of the presentation was adopted from UK's Backyard Streams program. So what do streams do? So our stream and wetland areas, they provide what we call ecosystem services. So you might have heard of that or be familiar with that term. It's services or benefits that we get from nature. And so that includes the ability for flood control, we get wetlands, we get animal and wildlife habitat. Our streams and especially our vegetative areas do really wonderful with sequestering carbon. I mentioned providing habitat, so really getting biodiversity. I don't remember the statistic offhand, but our stream areas and our wetlands provide a huge percentage of our overall biodiversity that we find in our watersheds. They're really, really critical sites for wildlife habitat. They provide aesthetic services, recreational opportunities. So you think about fishing or kayaking or simply just getting outside for a walk and getting near our streams. And they provide, especially if there's good soil and with wetlands and areas where the stream's allowed to slow down a little bit, they really help us with infiltrating water into the ground, storing water, which reduces the amount of water that's ultimately getting to our streams. And that's really important because the more water that's getting to our streams, the higher velocities that we see and the more erosion that's happening, which is probably what you all have experienced or are noticing the most, is really that high velocity water. The water kind of rips through the streams and really tears them apart. Okay, so a little bit about stream anatomy. So think about what makes a healthy stream. So streams have these different parts to them. So a big portion of our streams that are really important that we often are not seeing as much anymore is really that floodplain access. So there's that area where that stream is directly flowing, but then there's that buffer zone on each side of the stream that when that stream fills up, that water overflows into those buffer zones, and those areas are called the floodplains. And we often are losing our floodplain access because our streams are becoming vertical because of that erosion, and then that water isn't able to flow on top of the floodplain area and slow down and dissipate and infiltrate into the ground. It just keeps flowing downstream. Streams often, natural streams will have different meanders, creating pools and ripples in these different zones that are both really great for slowing down that water, but also essential for habitat, for fish spawning, getting those little pool zones. And then the riffles are really great because that riffle action, that effect there adds oxygen to the stream, and that's really important as well for wildlife. I'd mentioned oxygen, not enough oxygen in our waters being a concern that relates to our waters not meeting those standards. Good streams will have these in-stream habitat areas, so those pools, those riffles, as well as, it's not really shown in here very well, but there'll be little banks inside the stream or little sandbars that plants can start to grow, so that creates different habitat types. And then I did mention those buffer zones. So when we talk about a buffer zone here, we're really talking about the area that's adjacent to those streams that's planted. So it's got vegetation in place that's supporting the wildlife, slowing down the water, and then when it rains, it's connected to the stream in a way that that stream water can outflow onto the buffer zone and into that floodplain. And I mentioned this already, I got a little ahead of myself, but thinking about floodplains, so I mentioned slowing down the stream, reducing the in-stream erosion. Again, that in-stream erosion is really what's creating our streams having so much sediment in them, those brown streams, those stream ecosystems. And then from our human perspective, that's, what we're most concerned about right off the bat is reducing flooding. So we don't want to we like living along the stream, but we don't like when that water floods our backyard or even gets into our houses. I'd mentioned meanders, so I guess a little bit more about meanders. Oftentimes with our lands being developed, what happens is our streams get channelized. So the majority of the streams we have definitely in Curry's Fork, but also elsewhere around developed areas to develop and to build up our lands. Those streams the meanders have been taken out and those streams have been straightened. And so they become artificial streams without those meanders and bends anymore. And thinking about in-stream habitat, so we're not talking about just some wide open channel. Logs and leaf mats really do add to our in-stream habitat. They add nutrients. So it's kind of a balance. Sometimes streams get clogged, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The challenge is that if our homes and our buildings are so close to our streams that when the streams do get blocked, that water then is diverted out of the stream and can start to impact our properties. So we don't like that, but from a stream perspective and a stream health perspective, logs in our streams are fine. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later when I talk about solutions, but just free thinking, what our streams should look like and what's okay to have in our streams. Buffer zones, so we talk a lot about this. Our buffer zones, also our riparian habitats. So buffer zones, riparian habitats, I use those interchangeably. And from my perspective, I'm always talking about, when I'm talking about a buffer zone, I'm really thinking about that vegetative habitat right along the stream. So that's really called a riparian zone or riparian habitat. But if I say buffer zone, I'm using that in the same way. But it's important to think about other people may not use buffer zone in the same way. So when you're talking to other people about things like a buffer zone, it's good to clarify, what you mean by that term. But I'm using that interchangeably just to clarify that. And then again, what does this buffer zone do? So filters runoff, having really good vegetation, and healthy soil that is right up along your stream. You've got nice slopes there, so when that water floods, it can flood out onto that buffer zone. And then you've got these deep roots as healthy soil that's going to take up a lot of that water and reduce those heavy velocities going downstream and create really, really nice habitat. And they're really important, especially in agricultural landscapes for pesticide and fertilizer runoff, trying to reduce the amount of those runoff, of the pesticides or any type of chemicals. We want to reduce that to begin with, but especially in environments where you're more likely to use some type of fertilizer, it's really, really important to have a good buffer zone. Okay, I mentioned the dissipation of energy, so it's just sort of, I'm not great at physics, but hopefully that kind of is somewhat common sense that if you can just reduce the amount of water, reduce that speed, you're just going to reduce those forces that are ripping out our streams. And again, the vegetation holding that soil in place. Wildlife habitat, I've talked about this a lot. So one of the challenges with wildlife having good habitat along our streams is the temperatures of our water. So when we can vegetate the banks of our streams, get a really nice vegetative buffer in there, that's going to have the effect of cooling the water that's in our streams. And that's also very important because our fish do not like to take a hot bath. We want those temperatures to be low and to not have drastic increases, which can also lead to fish kills and other issues with wildlife. Okay, I think I mentioned this pretty well. So buffer zones, storing water, that groundwater recharge. As more and more of our land gets built up, there's just less water that's going into the groundwater to recharge that groundwater. And we don't have to worry about that as much here in Kentucky from a water, a drinking water perspective. A lot of other places do have to be concerned about this. But for us, trying to increase the water that's going into the groundwater as close to where it fell on the ground is going to just have huge positive impacts. So we don't want to keep sending our water down to the streams and out to the Gulf Coast. So keeping the clean water clean is a big thing to think about. Okay, summary. So our stream banks. So protecting our stream banks, protecting our soil. This is really, really valuable land. Helps improve water quality, improve wildlife habitat, aesthetics. Aesthetics I'll talk about a little more in a second too. And it can increase your property value, especially if that you have a very nice protected stream bank area. And I said I was going to talk about this. So one thing, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox about grass, but it's very, very common for people to just mow up to their stream because we have this perception that grass is the way to go. And we want grass, we want the short grass along our stream banks, but this is really leaving your streams vulnerable to erosion, and grass does not have very deep roots. It can be very compacted, so it's really not doing anything to create a really nice healthy stream buffer, and I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how our Curry's Fork program is working to improve our streams. So we have our Curry's Fork Watershed Plan, and this was completed in 2012 through efforts by Oldham County Fiscal Court and many stakeholders, organizations, agencies, partners in the watershed that work in the watershed, Oldham County, and the state to develop this plan that is a comprehensive report that outlines both stream concerns and solutions. And there are several solutions in our watershed plan that really focus on both stream restoration and riparian habitat. Okay, I'm not going to get too in the weeds of this, I don't think, but I just wanted to make sure that I provide a little bit of information on kind of what we're doing that's often behind the scenes. So try to be transparent with the public as possible about what we're trying to do here. So in our Curry's Fork Watershed Plan, there are 13 stream-specific best management practices. So there are 13 specific priority areas that the stakeholder group that helped to develop the watershed plan determined are really our highest priority locations for improving the stream and improving the riparian habitat. So an example of this would be BMP 18, and that's best management practice, interchangeable with solutions, so don't get caught up on the BMP there, just think about solutions. So BMP or solution 18 would be this confluence or intersection of North Fork and South Fork Curry's Fork. And so this is where these two streams meet together before the stream merges together and becomes the Curry's Fork main stem. So this was identified as a high priority area, and specifically in our watershed plan, it says that it would be beneficial to complete a stream restoration project on this site. Okay. So I'd mentioned that our watershed plan has these BMPs, these solutions that are somewhat split up between these two categories, one being stream restoration or mitigation. We've been talking a lot about mitigation here. Not today, but in the past few weeks, we've been looking at this. So stream restoration or mitigation, which we consider more a larger scale projects that really take buy-in and interest of usually several property owners. It can be challenging to find funding, and the process itself can be a very lengthy process, but the result you get is a stream that is essentially fixed. You get big equipment to come in, regrade that stream, take down those very vertical, steep banks, and essentially start over. You replant the site. So those projects are really great, but they're kind of the really long term. They can take, upwards of 10 plus years, the time that you get all the pieces in place and get things moving and get the project completed, and then you have monitoring. So that's something that we have been looking at doing here in Curry's Fork. It doesn't seem like it's a very viable option at the moment just because of all the various pieces, but it's not something, we're still looking at it and we're still reaching out to property owners, and we don't want to just set this option aside, but we want to keep moving with other options that are going to be a little quicker and more feasible. And that's why you all are here today. So the second piece here is our riparian habitat improvement. And this is where we get into promoting streamside habitat planting. So again, those buffers. And we're doing this at multiple angles with workshops, giveaways, so tree giveaways. We've got live stakes right now, so you might be involved in that or familiar with that. And then this cost share program, which I'm launching today. And there's a few maps here to put what I'm talking about into specific locations. So this map here is our Curry's Fork watershed, and it has these, it's symbolized based on streams that are identified as needing stream restoration, so more that larger scale regrading, that more challenging solution. Streams that have been identified as priorities for habitat, riparian, and sediment, so looking more specifically at our stream banks, so that's in purple. And then there are some streams in our watershed plan that have been identified as priorities for both. And it's a little more complicated than I'm not going to get into it a little bit anymore here, but I just want to clarify that we do have a plan, and the work that we're doing is really based on this plan and based on these priorities, and that's our goal to implement this plan, because we want to take actions that are going to be the most beneficial to help our streams. And then these two maps are the individual maps of stream restoration priorities and then the habitat priorities. And if you have more questions about this, just please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk, but for now I'll leave it there. Okay. Excuse me. So improving our streams from multiple angles. So it's important to clarify that how we do this is really much landowner driven and funding dependent. So luckily we do have funding right now to work towards some of these things, but it's really on the landowners to be interested and to take the steps. And so my job is to engage with property owners and try to encourage and facilitate that interest. So we're working on this, like I said, from multiple angles. I mentioned the stream restoration, so pursuing the bigger projects. That's still on the table. It's just not something that's actively happening right now. The second thing here, focusing on riparian habitat improvements, a little bit easier to swallow, a little bit easier to get some work done. And this is where we've had for the past couple of years workshops, tree giveaways, and now our cost share program. The third piece here that I just wanted to mention, and I'm going to talk about this more later on this summer, but I just wanted to quickly mention we have another piece here of improving detention basins with improved design and retrofit. So these are often the basins, or sometimes they're not filled with water, but in developments there's usually some type of basin or hole in the ground that gets built to handle the influx of stormwater runoff. So we have a grant that was actually approved, which is super exciting, to work towards improving these detention basins, which will help improve our streams. Okay, so once again, current efforts. I mentioned the detention basin improvement project. Again, I'll talk about that more later this summer. Stream management and restoration. So we held a workshop in April, and I've got the recording of that, and I'm going to keep reaching out to property owners and promoting that, which we hired Sustainable Streams, a company out of Louisville, to come in and help us assess some of our streams, identify some solutions. So we're still working towards that. Our live stakes planting. So I just ordered 1,000 live stakes, and I've been distributing those. So excited to get those out, and we'll keep doing these live stakes plantings and workshops every spring and fall is the goal to do those. And we've got a live stakes nursery that we're going to be planting at Wilborn Park and along Ellen Lake in LaGrange. And then this fourth part here, which is our cost share program. Okay, now I'm going to do a quick overview of this cost share program now that you've got the background information. So this is our official launch. Again, you don't have to be, it doesn't make sense to say, I guess, but people don't have to view this in order to participate. So if you go and you talk to a neighbor or you do some outreach, which I would greatly appreciate, just know that the people don't need to watch this in order to participate, but this is just that general overview, and I appreciate people watching this to understand what's going on. So initial application period, it's not an official application, it's really an interest form that I put together. From there, we're going to collect this interest form from people until the end of June. So try to have a couple month period where we're collecting forms from people. And then we have our internal project team, and we're going to review these. We're going to rank them based on those priority sites. So that's a little bit why I mentioned those watershed plan solutions or BMPs, because we have priorities, and whenever possible we really want to do work that fits with those identified priorities. But that doesn't mean that if you're not in one of those priority sites that you're not going to get help. This is just to give you a little more background on our process. And then from there, I'm going to reach out to those interested and get over to your site and look at your site with you and try to determine what might make the most sense and what you might be interested in. And we've been doing quite a few live stakes and tree giveaways, but oftentimes people's properties need a little bit more help, right? Especially if you've got a lot of invasives or you've got really steep banks. We don't have enough funds to really give people to just do the tree giveaways. We want to try to target this in a little bit more in-depth way by getting contractor assistance. So I'm going to meet with all the landowners, determine what might make sense for your site, and then from there take those properties that it would make sense to bring a contractor in and hire a contractor to get out to your site, provide a professional site evaluation, develop a site plan, and then do the work of preparing the site for planting, sourcing materials, and then assisting with the plantings and installing no-mow signs. Now, wherever possible, we do want to get volunteers involved or get the landowners involved, but this is just kind of the general outline for what we would likely be hiring contractors to help with. So a little bit more about our timeline. So we've got this initial application period. So I've got this deadline just to be fair to everybody and to try to get work started this fall, having these interest forms due by June 30th. This will be a first round. If we need more rounds, we'll do another one next year. And then, as I mentioned, site ranking, landowner notification. So that'll happen in July, and then I'll visit with the landowners in July as well. And then working in August to reach out to contractors and obtain quotes with the goal of beginning site evaluations, working out site plans, confirming what work is going to be done based on the landowner interest, on funding, and all those logistics there, with the hope again of beginning work in the fall. So in terms of projects here, so anticipated projects, we really want to focus on our stream or riparian buffer plantings. If we do things that are going to be more complicated than really focusing mostly on our stream banks, you're talking about really high dollar projects, and we don't have the funding for that right now. So we're trying to find the balance of getting some good work done, helping whoever wants to be helped, and managing that around our budget and our timeline. So we're mostly looking at improving our riparian areas through replanting, clearing invasives if necessary, and then replanting natives. Depending on what the site is, we could be using seed, which tends to be a little bit more cost effective, potted plants, which tend to be a little bit more expensive, and then trees, or a combination of these just based on the site. The second anticipated type of project I'm thinking about is in-stream log placement. And this is where you can take logs and they get secured either in the stream or along stream buffers around existing trees, and they're secured there. So when the water is flowing down into your stream, this really helps reduce those velocities and also helps to build up a little bit of in-stream habitat. If you've got like branches or leaves that are coming downstream, this will kind of stop them a little bit and then start to allow more sediment to build up in our streams, which will help improve them. Then we want to make sure we can get signs or do something to indicate no mowing around them, project signs. That'll be an important part there. And then from there, some amount of site monitoring, because we want to make sure they're successful. And if something's going on, we want to help to improve the site and make sure that it's going well and fix any issues that come about. So in terms of funding, I know this is probably something on your minds. I appreciate that. But we don't have this figured out just yet because we don't want to set kind of specific rules beforehand, because we want to see what interest there is to begin with. And we want to kind of figure out how to be fair to everybody who's interested in getting some help. I can say it'll be at least 50% up to a maximum. It could be more than that. I'm hoping it's more than that, but it really just depends on the interest that we get through the initial interest forms. So this is a cost share program, so it would entail upfront costs from the landowner in some way. Either if you're going to do the work yourself, then you would pay to get the materials to plant, and then you would be reimbursed. Or if we go the contractor route, it would be a reimbursement based on funds that go to the contractor. And these are all things, if you're familiar with the idea of cost share, then you probably know what I'm talking about. If you're not, then we'll just keep figuring out until we have all the details ironed out. But I don't want anybody to not submit an interest form based on not knowing funding yet, because of course you'll be aware of everything and you'll be committing to everything all along the way before anything happens. So don't worry too much about the funding right now. Just know we want to help people as much as possible, and realizing that this work is not regulatory. There's nobody forcing you to do anything. So in those cases, we really want to be as helpful as we can and assist as much as possible. So just know we want to do the best we can to get you help. In terms of match, so based on the cost share that's provided through our grants, the other portion, the other percentage, will count as match. And that can come in the form of actual dollars. It could also potentially come in the form of volunteer help. So, for example, say that you went out and planted your site yourself. You could track the hours that you spent. Maybe you had some family or some friends come by, and those hours could be attributed to an $18 an hour match. So there are some different pieces there, and we'll figure out all this out prior to anything actually moving forward. Okay, and we have this interest form here. Very simple, because I don't know really what the interest is we're going to get right now, and I don't want this to be prohibitive of people applying. I just want to know that you're interested, basic information. If you have concerns about your stream or your property, just give me a little information about what's going on, just to start. If you have a sense of what type of activities you're interested in for your stream, you can let me know there. And then you'll just send this form to me, and I have this both as a paper PDF and as a Google Drive form. So we'll collect these, and then I'll reach out to you individually from there after that. And this is the link to the Google form, and I'll send this out after as well. Okay, I mentioned live stakes, so that's the overview of the program so far. I mentioned live stakes, so we do have a tree planting this weekend at Wilbourn Park in LaGrange. If you'd like to come help, I'd love to have your help. It's Saturday, 10 a.m. You can just show up, or if you want to reach out to me to let me know you're coming, that's also great. But definitely appreciate any help to get out and help plant trees, because that's really, one of our big focuses right now. And that is all I have. So thank you. I was hoping to be less than an hour, and I've done that. Hopefully I haven't sped through things too quickly. But I will stop sharing my screen, and then I'm happy to take any questions now, or you're welcome to reach out to me later on. And I apologize that my camera is not working. I don't know what's going on, but sorry about that. I meant for it to be on. And what I can actually do right now is just put this form link in the chat. So if you want to grab that right now, please do. And any questions? Okay, I'm assuming no. Adam, I know I'm seeing you later. We can chat. But thank you, Teresa, and I don't know who else is on, but thank you for hanging out. And please reach out to me if you want to chat more. And I hope that you'll participate in the program and we can improve the stream where you live. So with that, I'm going to shut it down, but thanks again.